Good afternoon, Dr. Peters. How are you today? And how's your day?
I'm doing well, thanks. Yeah, thanks so much for doing this. I'm really excited to be here and to talk to you about Neuromatch.
Yep, everyone at Neuronified is also very excited to talk about Neuromatch and about you, because you are actually very inspiring to many people. And yes, so there are some questions that everyone wanted to ask you about Neuromatch, and there were some questions that I wanted to ask you. I was personally curious about Neuromatch as well as the field in general. So we're going to discuss them today. And so let's get started right away. Yes. So you are very, you enjoy being in the field of education, as we all know, and you have many initiatives to help people. How did this initiative start?
Okay, so you want to know from the very beginning, where did Neuromatch come from? So I cannot take credit for Neuromatch as an idea. Neuromatch, the conference version of Neuromatch, actually ran 2 full online conferences before I ever got involved. And so that initiative was led by Dan Goodman, Chris Rozelle, Conrad Cording, Titty Pat. Wow, I'm going to butcher his last name. I'm sorry, Titty Pat, if you're listening. I can't pronounce your last name. So there was this whole collective of people who, even before the pandemic, even before anything like that, said, we need to do something different. We need to promote access to scientific networking and scientific communication within the neurosciences, which is our field, without borders. We need to do it without carbon footprint. We need to do it without, or with minimal carbon footprint, and without the extreme level of fiscal monetary support that is required to actually participate in scientific dialogue worldwide. If you don't have $4,000 to throw at a trip, you can't go and you don't get to be part of the conversation. So that's where the Neuromatch conference started, was with that vision in mind. And the founders ran very successful 2 very successful online conferences. They were well attended. Everybody really enjoyed them. They were kind of a new and different thing in like February of 2020. And then March 2020 happened, and suddenly everything was online. And so this is where I got to be part of the conversation now. So kind of in parallel to how the conference was growing, Conrad Cording, Gunnar Blom, and Paul Schrader had, for the past 10 years, been organizing a summer school, a 2-week course in computational neuroscience called COSMO, the Computational Sensory Motor Summer School, that would bounce around among the 3 universities where they are all professors. And I had attended COSMO when I was a student. So I got to go and do the in-person intensive summer school experience all the way back in 2013. And I had such a great experience with it and really made a connection not only with the other students in my cohort, but also with the instructors. I really learned so much from them and saw that this was an opportunity to network and to kind of grow into being a participant in the global neuroscience community. So I tried to kind of stay connected to them. We, said hi at conferences and stuff like that. And so they had invited me to come back as a lecturer once I got my faculty position. So I went and I taught at Cosmo in person, and then they invited me to join the organizers committee. And I was so excited because I was like, here is this summer school that truly changed my life. And now I get to help build it and organize it so it can change the lives of students going forward. And then the pandemic hit, and meanwhile, we couldn't organize Cosmo because all of the summer schools got canceled in 2020, all of them. I mean, we all know why. So Conrad and Gunnar and Paul and I got together on Zoom and said, well, we can't run Cosmo, what can we do instead? And we thought, well, everything's kind of online now. Maybe like let's put up some videos and like make the tutorials available online, and like can't be that much work, right? Like we can just do this and we'll like run kind of a online version of the academy, of the summer school. And then we started pulling in more folks to kind of help organize the school and lecturer component. So we pulled in Brad Weibel, who had also been one of the co-founders of the conference. I think I forgot to mention that. And then we also brought in Shauna Scola, who had a lot of ideas and connections in ways to support the school financially. So it was kind of the six of us, and then it exploded. We had this idea that we could run this summer school, and then we started pulling in people like Patrick Minot and people like Kate Bonin and Carson Stringer and all of these other people who thought, well, why stop at just a few videos, or why stop at just, some code that we put up on Google Colab, or, something like that. Like, let's make this the gold standard for online computational neuroscience education. Why not? We've got nothing better to do right now. We're all sitting at home on our computers, not going anywhere. And so that's what happened, is that it kind of snowballed, and it the response from the global neuroscience community was just phenomenal, just outstanding, and so humbling to see people from literally over 100 countries, every continent in the world except for Antarctica, like all of them coming together to build this collective, selfless act of service and love to the neuroscience community on a global scale. It's just like truly awe-inspiring. And so that's kind of how it came to be. And then we ran it, and we had like, a couple thousand students the first time around. We managed to form the nonprofit, get enough money to actually pay the TAs. We got help from a legal team to get us that Iran license to be able to operate within Iran and include folks across geopolitical borders. And since then, it has been just a wild ride of so much love and support from the neuroscience community. And then the conference has been a wild success as well. Like the Neuromatch Conference 3 had 10,000 registered participants. I mean, it's just astonishing. I didn't even know there were that many computational neuroscientists in the world, right? So it's just been a really fun journey to be on, and I'm just really happy to be able to be a part of it.
So recently, as you said, that this community is very collaborative and helpful, which is something that I observed when I was new to the field, which is not long ago, like a year ago, which was my introduction to the field. I had a background in electronics and communication signals. And so while the transfer was mathematically easier for me, but I got a lot of help and support from PhD students, postdocs, professors, even founders of startups. And I think compared to the other fields that I have been in, other domains that I've been in, this community is actually a lot more collaborative and helpful. So yeah, that's something new and for me, and good to I think that's what encouraged me to also be a part of this community and try to give back a little. So yes, that is something I did observe. And recently I also saw your interview with Dr. Saraf. I hope I got the name right. And so you guys discussed a lot of details about the Neuromatch Academy summer school and the conference there. So I would want this to be a complimentary experience for everyone out there, so that people can learn and watch both of them. And I'll obviously link to the video here too, because I thoroughly loved it, and there were quite a lot of details that were covered there, the dates, the application cycles. So I would keep the questions more on the experience side, or what I think would extend that information source. So one thing that you said too briefly was that the structure of Neuromatch Academy is very unique. There are pods and there are TAs There was a project RA, there was a professor who was a mentor, and I think that was a lot of fun talking to so many experienced people, helping you and guiding you throughout all the tutorials. Um, why was the structure chosen? I mean, I'm sure this must have been very hard to bring together, put together. So yeah, what was the thought behind the structure?
That's a great question. So first I want to address just to say, I'm so happy that you feel like this is a supportive and welcoming community. I feel that too. And I think that it's kind of this self-fulfilling cycle where all the people who kind of believe that that's how neuroscience education should work are the people who have gotten involved with Neuromatch. And so it's a little bit of a biased sample, if you will, but it's kind of this nice gravitational well that collects people who are all kind of similarly minded. And then we can share that vision with everybody else. And part of that vision is this structure that we've developed for Neuromatch Academy. So one of the things that we noted when we were starting to develop the program, there were a couple different kind of moving parts here. The first is that for online training programs and online, intensive workshops and that kind of thing, there really wasn't a lot available that occupied the space of what we call high touch, like high interaction, but was still online. So of course we have massive open online courses or MOOCs. Anyone can go to Khan Academy and Coursera and do their thing and watch the videos and whatever and do it on their own. And then we also have traditional education in classrooms, which is you've got a TA and a professor and you get to know your cohort of students over a semester long course or something like that. And then within the traditional education space, I suppose, there's also the summer school, traditional summer school component, which is you go somewhere for 2 or 3 weeks, you basically lock yourself in a dorm in a classroom with 20 other people and you learn a bunch of stuff. And it's very high touch and it's very intensive. So we wanted to kind of take all the good bits of all of those things and put them together into something that had really not been done before, which is a crazy high touch, very interactive, and yet still online course that lasts for more than a one-day workshop. We wanted it to be 2 or 3 weeks, which is the typical length of a traditional in-person summer school. So a lot of the structure basically came from Cosmo, actually. So Gunnar and Paul and Conrad had been running Cosmo for 10 years and had really learned what worked and what didn't work in terms of optimizing student experience, optimizing student knowledge gain, all of these things. And they knew that small group projects are really good. And they're really good if you also have a faculty mentor who actually gets into it with you, who doesn't just show up occasionally and be like, yeah, good work, okay, bye. You need to have someone who's going to get into it with you and guide you. They don't have to be an expert in exactly the question that you're asking. But they do need to be an expert in guiding you to ask your own questions and figure out the answers. And so this was the pedagogical approach that we applied to both the faculty mentors and the TAs. The TAs, they don't need to be perfect experts in every single detail of all of the material that's covered, but they do need to be trained to help students kind of arrive at their own answers, or guiding the conversation so that you can discover ways of finding solutions kind of on your own. So all of that was stuff that, Gunnar and Paul and Conrad had kind of learned over 10 years of running Cosmo. And then we also had on our original organizing crew, folks who had organized other summer schools. And this was because their summer schools got canceled. So they couldn't run those summer schools that summer, and they decided to come and maybe help out and give us some advice. So we kind of had this critical mass of collective knowledge where people who had been driven to develop and optimize educational opportunities and programs in the summer school intensive space all just spontaneously and voluntarily shared their expertise. And we went back and forth so much in that first year about Do we have group projects or not? That's a lot of Zoom time. How can we like make it so that you're not completely Zoom fatigued? How can we capture the collective feeling of camaraderie that you get from these summer schools, especially from the small group interactions at these summer schools, where even now I am still in contact with the people who were part of my group project almost 10 years ago at that summer school. One of them is actually helping organize Neuromatch, which is great. So these are the kinds of connections, long-lasting, deep-rooted science friendships that we wanted to foster. And so that was our primary goal, was to say anybody can put up videos online. Anybody can go do videos online. That is so lonely to sit there in your room and watch videos and like type out tutorials and stuff. It's also not educationally optimal. Discussion, peer programming, guidance, but not like, memorization of answers you can regurgitate, but like learning how to discover the answers yourself. All of these are educational components that, years of education research, decades of education research, we know it works. We just needed to figure out how to put it on a screen instead of in an in-person classroom.
From what you said, one thing that really stuck out was that the TA does not need to know for all the content, but should be able to help you and guide you with where to look, how to understand, and what questions to ask. So I naturally have this question: that is there some preparation that a TA is provided, and can you elaborate on that so that maybe people who are worried that they might not be good enough to apply for a TA but really want to help out can maybe apply this time?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So I think the most important thing is that you need to have at least a solid background in math and programming and the foundational concepts that we teach in the course. If you've never heard of a drift diffusion model, you're probably not a good candidate to be a TA. But that being said, you didn't develop the tutorials. You are not an expert in every single topic that's taught in Neuromatch Academy. And spoiler alert, neither am I, and neither is anybody else who is actually building this. That's kind of the whole point, is that we got the best people in the world that we could find to teach that day's worth of material. And that means that even the organizers who kind of went out and found those people and helped them develop the materials to fit within our curriculum, they're not experts in that either. Like this is like doing a PhD in a box in 3 weeks on steroids. Like this is just kind of, the volume of information is just insane. So it's unreasonable for us to expect that our teaching assistants, who are typically late stage PhD students, postdocs, and occasionally faculty members, if they want to, it's completely unreasonable for us to expect that they have expertise in all of these topics. They need to have the foundations. They need to understand the basics. But the specific details, like we have an instructor version of the tutorials, like you get the answers.
Yes,
and so your goal is to help the students arrive at the answers on their own, rather than like just receiving a question and then like giving them an answer right away. And so to help TAs learn how to do this, we have a comprehensive TA training program that's part of the experience. So when you sign up to be a TA, if you apply and you're accepted, and the application involves a bunch of demographic information and statements of intent and stuff like that, but then also you have to do like a little video where you teach, I think it's ridge regression, in like 5 minutes. So basically there we're evaluating your ability to explain concepts clearly. And that if you can teach ridge regression in a clear manner in 5 minutes, then you can probably handle, with the training and support services that we provide, you can probably handle, teaching the rest of the staff, or let's call them guiding the students, not teaching. So then this training program is all about developing these skills in guiding students, not in building comprehensive expertise in the material, but in learning how to teach material, even if you don't know exactly all of the details yourself. And then we supplement that with periodic access to those content creators, the people who actually built the tutorials. And over the past couple of years, we've built up this kind of collective body of knowledge also, which means that a lot of the same questions that get asked over and over again, we now have a knowledge base. And so the TAs can then help each other. So we also structure the course so that they can access the content creators, they can access the knowledge base, and they can access each other. So even if you're a TA and you're not an expert in, the Bayesian brain hypothesis, there's someone else in your small, we call them super pods, which are basically pods of pods. And so there's a lead TA there who kind of oversees a small number of pods. And we encourage the TAs in the super pod to go and talk to each other. So this builds like this hierarchical community where no one is in charge of anybody else, but we're all there to kind of maximally support each other. And to provide the resources that you need to kind of, again, just like for the students, the TAs also get the resources to find the answers on their own. So it's kind of this, everybody's doing the same kind of thing, just in a slightly different space.
That's good to hear, actually, that even the TAs get have so much to learn here. I mean, it must be a huge learning curve for anyone to be able to teach what they know, and to learn what they do not, and help students. I think that's an even bigger learning. I think, it's a huge learning. I think, I would sometimes panic if I had to suddenly teach something that I wasn't very sure about. So that is a very important skill to have.
Yeah, nothing like exposure therapy to get over your fear of having to teach something that you don't fully understand. But it's true. Like even in my real job here as a professor at UC Irvine, there are occasionally times where I'm like, well, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm gonna have to go look that up. Yeah. And that's okay. And so like learning that it's okay when you get a kind of curveball question from a student, that's fine. And that's an important skill for us to build as well.
Yes, true. I remember badgering my TA last year with so many questions like, okay, why exactly, why are we doing this? And I remember sometimes she used to be like, I have to think about it. And then the whole pod used to think about it and we used to discuss it with the TA. And I think, yes, Neuromatch for me was more special because of my TA, who was, I think, excellent mentor. And we did, as you said, that interactions between pods are also very good. Like we used to have random discussions on Friday evenings with the other pods after classes. And people stayed and we used to talk about novels. We used to talk about movies or some sci-fi reference to neuroscience or something. It was just everyone wanted to be there. No one was supposed to be, but they wanted to be, which was, I think, it's a huge progress when it comes to virtual events. And so, I think thank you for that to the entire team.
Well, it's a labor of love from all of us. I mean, one of my favorite things is being able to kind of just watch the chatter in like the Discord servers and just seeing people understanding. I'm not spying on people here. It's more just understanding that like people are having fun and they want to be there and they're talking about science and we're facilitating these connections that like people you would never meet otherwise. And yet you can find like science friends from another country or another continent. And then maybe eventually when we all go back to in-person stuff, if that ever happens, you meet up at a conference and you actually shake hands with this person that is now like one of your closest friends and you've never met in real life,
That is the goal, actually. Some people often ask me this question, which is, what opportunities open up after attending a Neuromatch Academy? For example, if assuming that someone rigorously participated in the summer school, what should they expect for themselves in terms of opportunities or positions or suitable match for their level of information, especially if they are not from the field, or are not from a conventional background, for example, EE or CS or neuroscience or mathematics. Yes.
Great question. So there's a couple concrete things that you can expect. And keep in mind that all of this is fluid and we're always trying to innovate and change things. So some of the things that I mentioned, may be slightly different in this round in how they're implemented for the community, but the goal is always connection. The goal is always to facilitate strong community bonds, both at the individual and at the group level. So one of the concrete things that you can expect is if you do a group project, which is not required, but is strongly recommended, because there's nothing like fighting your way through a real data set to show you how the little toys that we build for you in the actual tutorials, they are not adequate to analyze a real data set, but they'll get you started, right? They set you on the right path. So if you do a group project, strongly recommend that you do, then we're working on ways to actively encourage. So there's always been an active encouragement of these group projects to submit them to the Neuromatch conference, which is a cool way of kind of reconvening with your pod or your small group project, again, in a virtual environment, but to present the work that you've been doing. And so to that end, the conference will usually happen, a number of months after the academy is over. So you have time to kind of finish up some loose ends of your project if you want, and then you can submit. So that's one kind of concrete way that you can do this. One of the other things that we've explored in the past is this individual mind matching of students to each other and students to faculty mentors who have volunteered to do that, and so on and so forth. And so this is something that we are continuing to refine, and it might look a little bit different this year. In the past, what's happened is that people who signed up for this mind matching, like we ship the matches and we send you an email that says, here are your matches, like enjoy. And then it becomes homework. And then it becomes like, oh, now I have to reach out to all these people and I have to schedule meetings with them. And it's like, and people we found that it is maybe less successful in this kind of open-ended space than we think it could be. So I don't know what this is going to look like this year, but we're trying to think of ways to refine the mind matching procedure. So it's not just, we're going to ship you a list of names that we think are like people you might get along with, but maybe actively promote the results of those mind matching matches at not only the Neuromatch conference, but also maybe other in-person conferences, like maybe hold like an event at a friend conference, a partner conference or something. So we don't have these all sorted out yet. I can't tell you what that's going to look like this year, but that's something that we're actively working on to say, okay, once you get through the school and you collapse from exhaustion, because you will, we all do on the organizer side, like we get through and we all sleep for like 3 days. But then like what happens next? How do we maintain those connections? And part of this is the networking that you mentioned with potential postdoctoral opportunities or potential graduate opportunities, connection with faculty mentors that you can build connections with and maybe even get a position with or get a job with later. And so we've got a job board, and that will happen again this year, where people who want to recruit from within the Neuromatch community, people who have done Neuromatch Academy and who have really grabbed that bull by the horns and taken advantage of this, you are so skilled and so awesome in terms of when you come out of this, you are like a super combination of all of the computational skills that are cutting edge and most exciting stuff in the field. And so people who come out of Neuromatch Academy and who push through and really like take advantage of this opportunity are really attractive candidates when you apply to PhD programs in computational neuroscience or cognitive science or psychology or AI or any of these other kind of related fields, like having that on your list of accomplishments and having that certificate of completion. I mean, the certificate of completion is, we're not an accredited institution. You can work with your institution to maybe get credit. That's possible. A few institutions are doing that, but we can't offer credit, but we can offer a demonstration that you did this. You got through this and you are coming out of it with these skills. That's super attractive to a lot of supervisors around the world, both at the PhD and the postdoctoral level. And this is true not just for students, but for TAs. So for example, and I won't name names because I don't want to call anybody out, but I have now in my group here at UC Irvine, a former Neuromatch TA. And he has joined my group as a PhD student. And the only reason that we know each other is because of Neuromatch. And I am thrilled that he is here. I'm super excited. And I know that this exact thing has happened for a lot of the other organizers too. There have been cases where former Neuromatch students and TAs get the position because of the connections that they made at Neuromatch, either with the organizers or with their faculty mentor. So no, we can't promise any positions here, but we can do our very best to make those connections stable and strong. And another way that we do this is also with industry partners. So one of our major sponsors, which is Facebook Reality Labs or Meta Reality Labs, I'm not actually sure what their name is now, but they sponsor us and they run a recruitment event. And we know that there are some Neuromatch alums, some Neuromatch Academy alums who have gotten jobs there. And that's really cool too.
Yeah.
Because now here you are like putting into practice all of the stuff that you learned in Neuromatch Academy. So we're constantly looking for ways to improve this. So for anybody who's listening, if you've got ideas, please send them our way, ways that we can actually make this networking better and stronger and more useful to all of you as well.
I personally would agree that the networks lead to excellent opportunities in terms of collaboration or otherwise, maybe in terms of referrals or jobs or just in general long-term connections that will definitely help you out in case you want some, help with a project or a role, or you're interested in something and want to know more. I mean, I think that is something that Neuromatch has definitely helped in. And as a PI, yourself, as you mentioned, that someone joined, some former TA joined your group. What is expected out of a potential candidate, maybe for RA or in your case, a PhD candidate?
What is expected, like for my lab, for someone?
No, in general, what would someone expect from people, especially if they have only had exposure to computational neuroscience or neuroscience through Neuromatch Academy, but don't have the background otherwise, like they don't have the educational, like the conventional education background?
Okay, that's a great question. So I'll first preface this by saying that there's a great professional development session that we ran last year at Neuromatch Academy, where we covered like what are kind of some best practices in applying to graduate school. And a lot of that same advice can be applied to getting a research assistantship or getting a postdoc as well. So I don't have the link off the top of my head, but we can find it and I can ship it to you later. But I think that you shouldn't worry so much about a lack of traditional educational background. That the most important thing is the willingness to learn and the willingness to make mistakes and to try to remedy those mistakes. And also a concerted effort to find a good match. So I strongly recommend that you don't just kind of blast the same form email to everybody that you think you might want to work with. And this is something that I actually see from my perspective. I get these form emails from people who are in theory interested in working in my group, and I know lots of other professors get these too, but it's like, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm interested in working in your group. Here is a bunch of stuff about me, the end.
Okay.
And the bunch of stuff about you doesn't have anything to do a lot of times with my research, and it doesn't tell me why you picked my lab instead of the lab next door. And I think that that is really important, because you want to show that you're not just blasting these to every email address you can find, but that you have selected me. So if I'm going to take the time to write back to you, you should take the time to write to me personally. And then I can also say, like, well, you sound like an awesome candidate for my group. I'm really super excited about these skills that you're bringing to the table. And you said you're interested in this topic and in these projects. And it's very clear that you read a few of my papers and you've got some specific things that you want to discuss with me. That's a great email. Even if that email does not show that you're a good fit for my group, it might be the case that I say, and I've done this like many times, where I say, you know, you're not a good candidate for my group, but based on what you've said and why you think you're interested in my group, here's some other people that you might want to reach out to. And I've done this time so that those personalized emails, that personalized reaching out, can, at least in my hands and in the hands of all the folks that I know at Neuromatch and beyond, it will help the person you're reaching out to kind of guide you in the right direction, even if their lab is not a good fit ultimately. So it's really about fit. It's about expressing why you're excited to join that group, what you think you can bring to the table. And my group consists of like engineers and on the one side, all the way to almost like philosophers on the other. And everything in between. So I've got philosophers and neuroscientists and engineers and psychologists and AI researchers, and they're all kind of in this, like, we're all this kind of happy family together. And so it's like, just because I see an email from someone who doesn't have like the traditional neuroscience, computational neuroscience background, doesn't mean at all that they are not potentially a good fit for my group. It's really about fit. It's about, are the types of questions you want to answer the types of questions that I want to answer. And then we'll work out the details other than that later.
That is excellent advice. And I agree with you that your mails definitely need to be personalized. At least that's what I've seen from personal experience. And as you said, professors do want to help you out if they are not a match, because that's something I have seen. And yes, I think personalized emails are the way to go, definitely. No two ways about it. And another question that many people ask is if they want to learn more, like continue, if they don't think they are there yet and they want to learn more, what additional resources would be the best go-to after Neuromatch Academy's summer school?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot here. I think this goes back actually to an earlier question that you asked, which is, what do you do after Neuromatch to kind of maximize the impact that it might have? And so, while I'm not going to suggest explicit resources or other summer schools or courses, because I can't think of them off the top of my head. But what I will say is that what you do in Neuromatch Academy is meant to, it's designed to be a fire hose of information. Yeah. And it is not expected that you get it all the first time or the second time or the third time. But what it's meant to do is help you build like a toolbox or a library, so that then when you encounter a new, really interesting problem in your own research, you have two completely complementary types of tools from Neuromatch Academy that you can use to tackle that problem. The first is the little toys that we've built themselves, which is, how do I build Bayesian inference model? How do I build a spiking neural network? How do I build a reinforcement learning model? Like let's have some sample code so I have a little toy and that can be my starting point. So I'm not just staring at like a blank document. I have like some stuff that I can, a foundation to start from. So that's one type of tool. But the other type of tool is that we want to ask you through this fire hose of information to learn how to ask your own questions and to learn how to select which tool is appropriate for asking and answering those questions. And that's something that is hugely beneficial, whether you're taking a linear algebra course at your own university or whether you're designing your own dissertation research. Learning how to, from among all of the options out there, learning how to pick which approach is likely to provide you with answers that you like and that are useful and interesting and informative, that's huge. And so we're hoping that then, like internalizing those messages, even if you don't remember exactly how to implement a particular model, that then you can go back to the materials and so that this becomes a resource for you. And I know that some of my students, both here at UC Irvine, and I have several co-advised students over at UC Riverside, where I used to be on the faculty, that they've told me that they go back to the Neuromatch materials. They go back and say, okay, I'm going to play with this toy so I can get an intuitive understanding of how this system is working. And then maybe I'll build my own model, or I'll design my own data analysis using some other resource, a course that I took for my program, course that I took on Coursera, something that my friend told me. It basically teaches you how to kind of take a step back from the problem and understand the problem space. And so that, I think, is the most important thing to do after Neuromatch Academy. There's not like one course that you should go do afterwards. You should be able to select which course is the best one after Neuromatch Academy.
From what I understand, I think in what I would also do is maybe after the program, instead of going to more courses and learning more theory, maybe pick up a project and try to formulate your own questions, and maybe that's the best way to go for people rather than picking up another course where you learn more concepts. I think that would be the best way forward.
That would certainly be one way forward. You could also find that through Neuromatch Academy, like these are all like little hors d'oeuvres almost, like they're little like appetizers of how, like, the power of each of these methods. And so it's very possible, and indeed very likely, that some of them you will find not so appetizing. And some of them you will be like, this is the most delicious thing that I have ever encountered. I want more of that. And so then that will help you kind of sample. It's like a sampler. You get to kind of pick which ones then speak to you. And then you can go do a deep dive into those methods, find courses at your own university or like online that might give you a lot more hands-on experience and theoretical foundation in like that particular topic.
Okay. Makes sense, yes. So my pod had doctors, engineers, economists, and I think, yes, that was the range. And it was very surprising to see, someone from a purely economics background, participate in such a rigorous course and be there every day, do all the tutorials, try to be, be a part of the projects too. So why do you think that such diverse background, people from such diverse backgrounds are getting interested and, so much so that they get into such a rigorous curriculum?
Good question. So maybe two types of answers here. One, there's no economics match, doesn't exist. There's only Neuromatch right now. We are thinking and working on expanding into other areas, so stay tuned for that. But right now, there's no economics match. There's no microbiome match. There's no marine biology match. There's only Neuromatch. And so we only have the two courses. So I feel like the success of this program, not only in its educational goals, but in its networking goals. I mean, here we are talking about this. Would you ever go on a podcast and talk about how much you love like your classes that you took at your university, right? This is a different thing. And so the success, I think, drives us towards expanding this educational and pedagogical approach into other areas. So I think that that's one reason why people gravitate towards it, is because it's the only, well, now we have 2 courses, but they're the only ones of their kind. We're the only ones who are really doing this like this, at this scale, with this amount of reach, and with this specific format. And we hope there will be copycats and clones, and like that people will take this format and run with it and fix the things that are broken with it and optimize it so that we can learn from them. Like, please copy this and try out different versions of it, try out different, you know, make it go slower over 6 months where you meet only every Saturday, or make it like pile it into only weekends and only select the pieces that you want. Try out all of these things and then copy it. So that's one reason why people are gravitating towards it. The other reason is that whether you're studying intelligent behavior from an AI standpoint, intelligent behavior from a neuroscience and computational neuroscience standpoint, or other complex systems like economics and society and climate and so on. These are all examples of super complex systems where a lot of the types of modeling approaches are actually surprisingly similar. No, you're not going to build a spiking neural network and have that kind of be a plausible way to describe economic decision making. There's no spikes, you know, you don't need to think about neurons, but decision making under uncertainty, you know, minimization of risk outcomes, that kind of thing. The math is the same between economics and neuroscience. And while I'm not an economist, my dad is, and we talk about this sometimes, and I always find it very like comforting and surprising when the complex systems that we're studying are, they almost couldn't be more different. He studies energy economics and economic theory for like power transfer and electricity generation in like the west half of the United States. And I study how humans make decisions under uncertainty and how the brain implements those decisions and implements self-evaluation of those decisions. So on the surface, they really look very different. But under the hood, what we're both building is generative stochastic models of complex systems. That's what we're doing. So it kind of makes sense that the math overlaps and that we can actually learn a lot from this cross-pollination.
That is good to hear, and actually very self-assured. It's very assuring to hear, because I remember when in high school, I had taken, I had economics classes, and I had physics, math classes, and people thought I was crazy for also auditing psychology classes as my friend's subject. And like, and I used to get questions like, what do you think are you going to do with all this, or ever make sense of it? And I also struggled quite a bit back then, choosing either merge all of them in some way, or choose one of them, which really hurt because I did not want to do that. And as you said, even my dinner table conversations are always either economics or neuroscience or art, because my father is that.
They're all the same. They're all the same.
Yes, and it's actually very good to hear. Yeah, because
called neuroeconomics, behavioral economics. These are like fields that there's huge literatures associated with them, and so it makes sense that you're building a model of a complex system. You want to understand its generative structure. You want to build like causal explanations that are satisfying of these complex systems. You want to know, if I poke on this parameter, what happens in the outcome? It's the same type of questions. You're just asking them about a different system.
While I was applying for Neuromatch last year, I was going through the questionnaire, and there were some technical questions, and there were some very interesting self-assessment questions, where do you see yourself in the class, and how do you assess yourself as a teacher or a leader or a questions along those lines, which were very interesting, and I had a lot of fun, picking them. But and it must be a huge data source for understanding the demography and the people who are applying. So could you share some exciting, interesting insights that were made, or yes?
Oh gosh, okay. So we don't have any super exciting insights yet, unfortunately. This is a huge, as you said, huge data set, super fun data set. Anybody who wants to come play with this data set, let us know, because we need some help. It's massive, and despite our best efforts, it's a little messy. And so, but like, it's such a powerful way of gleaning insights, because our student body is enormous and it spans so many different countries and languages and cultures and educational backgrounds and education levels. And so there are all of these variables that we now have that we can potentially use to not only understand how students are progressing in the course, but maybe how to even optimize the experience on the basis of those demographic elements. So if you want to come play with the data, please come play with the data. But I will say that some of our preliminary analysis has been about things like, what are the likelihood that you finish the course on the basis of whether we matched you into a language pod versus an English pod? What is the likelihood that you finish the course just based on pure attendance records alone, never mind anything else, based on educational level coming in, based on your self-reported programming capacity. So we use those as kind of a screening, which is you need to have a basic level of math and programming understanding, or this is going to be a really bad experience for you. You're just going to feel frustrated. We don't want that for anybody. If you don't have that yet, wait a year. We're not going anywhere. Like, beef up your background and then try and like come back, and we'll gladly bring you in when you've got that foundation. But if you've never written a for loop in your life, you're going to have a bad time. Like that kind of level. If you've never seen a derivative in your life, this is not going to be a fun experience for you. So we have those kind of self-assessments, but we don't need to, at least right now, we've decided not to do objective assessments of programming capacity and math capacity, because ultimately, if you want to do NMA, like, you are here because you want to be here, and we're going to try our best to make the experience as useful to you as possible in lots of different ways, education, networking, etc. But we're not forcing you to be here. And so if you like, there's kind of no reason to lie on this, because once again, if you say you're, a master programmer when you've really never ever seen an if statement or a for loop, you're going to find out very quickly that this isn't for you. So one of the best ways to evaluate that is to just go look at the materials ahead of time, because they're all available publicly for free. So you can just go and have a scan through all of the notebooks, all of the exercises. If it looks like it's unfamiliar, but you could probably figure it out if you had help, great. If it looks like a Martian language to you, then maybe you should take a little bit more math and programming before you try. And then we have all these other demographic questions as well. This past year, we also collected, as you said, questions about, are you having fun in your group? Do you feel like you belong? Do you feel like you are better or worse than your peers?
Yes.
And we also collected objective measures of how much you learned the material. So those little, there were 2 to 5 questions at the end of every day that was like, hey, just kind of a knowledge check. There's no grades. There's no penalty for getting the questions wrong. We use these to assess, did this day's material and resources do a good job of teaching? So if a lot of students didn't like the material, then we want to revamp the course. If students loved the material, but they didn't get anything out of it, then we still also need to go back and fix something. And likewise for this sense of belonging and stuff like that. So we want to make sure that we're promoting the right types of pod cohesion to maximize the learning environment, to optimize the learning environment. And the last piece that I'm super excited about, which I don't know if you remember, but this was totally a voluntary opt-in thing, like completely no pressure. You can say yes or no, either way, no problem. But we asked if people would be willing to opt in to having written transcripts of interactions on Zoom be anonymized and then analyzed with natural language processing.
Yes.
So I'm super excited about this because we have a team of researchers actually here at UC Irvine, which is coincidental that they just happen to be at the same institution as me. But they are using natural language processing algorithms to look at how people interact. And then we're going to look at how that relates to feelings of belonging and feelings and actual objective learning outcomes pre to post. So we have all of these assessments and the data set is like this big. It's huge. And we need people to comb through it. And so if you want to come and like play with data, like please come and play with data because we've got this all anonymized now. So nothing is like personally identifying information, and we can actually play around and see, you know, does the fact that you are an undergraduate with a double E background whose first language is French, how does that impact your interpersonal connections with your pod, and how can we use that to understand how to better like make our optimization algorithm better to like better match people into pods. So there's like huge potential here. We don't right now have the manpower to actually do all of those things that we would like to do. But if anyone's listening, if this sounds like a fun problem for you, then please come join us.
I think you will get, your email will be flooded with messages and mails after the release, which is, I think, something, and I am waiting for the insight. I mean, that was the one thing I wanted to ask you. The minute you said yes, I wanted to know, okay, because that sounds very interesting to me. Maybe you'll find a mail from me too.
Like I want to know these answers too. And I think I'm so excited about this aspect because I think that this is a truly unique opportunity to study a new format of education delivery that is something different from what existed before. And we now have the opportunity not only to study it, but to like very swiftly innovate and make it better. We are not constrained by the traditional walls of universities. We are not constrained by the traditional format of massive online courses. We are our own thing. And so we have the opportunity to say, like, if this type of pod did better than this other type of pod, then we should try to make pods that look like this one. Mm-hmm. Because those people across the large cohort that we have had better learning outcomes and a better experience. And so we want to drive towards that. And we can do that. We can actually make pods that exhibit those conditions. So we will try to do that in the future, but there is so much work to do. So much work to do. Well, I'm excited to see what kind of response we have here too, because I think that one of the things that we are doing a less good job of at Neuromatch is actually communicating this excitement outside what Neuromatch is doing. We are so, especially from like an organizer's perspective, we are so deep in this and there's so much work to do. And we've done a poorer job. Now we have a new good fabulous communications team, and so they're like really killing it. It's awesome, but like our website needs a little bit of love, you know. Like there's some things about what Neuromatch is doing and the things that make me most excited about being part of Neuromatch that I think have not been effectively communicated to kind of the outside world. And so I'm excited that this is an opportunity for us to talk about a few of those things.
Amazing. I think every podcast episode is turning into a sort of recruitment session, and it's amazing actually if that can help connect two interested in people together. Yes, so now we are looking for a web developer or someone to maintain the website and someone to work on the data set.
We have like great web developers. We have great coders who are developing like the student application portal and the TA application portal, and they're awesome. The problem is that we're all doing this like on our nights and weekends. And so as amazing as our team is and how dedicated, selfless, like the amount of ourselves that all of the organizers are pouring into this is just truly astonishing. There's just so much to do. Like we accidentally founded a university, oops. And so like we need like help running it.
Yes.
And so one of the things that we've done a less good job at is getting the word out about all the cool stuff that we're doing. So thank you for the opportunity to gush about this cool stuff.